Yo guys, so someone wanted to know how to make the rigid bend from the Minecraft rig that I created. So it's very simple, but you need to understand a few things first. So I'm going to go through it as quickly as possible, but in as slow as detail as possible so you guys can understand. But most of the tutorials that I do are quite long, over 20 minutes. I don't think you want to be sitting through that. So let's get started. We're going to create a cube. This cube will be 25 and 25 on the X and Z, and for the Y, which is the height, it's going to be 75. That's going to give us a Minecraft limb, such as an arm or a leg. We're going to put on the ground shading line so we can see, because the lines that we need are important. We actually need 3 segments. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. We need 3 lines, but it's going to require 4 segments. If you see over here in the Y segments, if we put this to 3, we're actually going to get 2 segments, which isn't what we actually need. We need 3, so we actually have to up the segments on the Y to 4, which gives us these 3 lines. Now it's important that we have these 3 lines because this top line acts as the boundary for the top section, and this is going to stop the texture skewing. What I mean by texture skewing is when the arm bends, if we don't have this line here, it's actually going to pull these polygons down, and that's not what we want. So we want these to actually be one at the top, one at the bottom, and then the one in the middle will actually be where the arm actually bends. So keep that in mind. Once we've got that, we're going to hit C on the keyboard to make that editable. Go down here in the Attributes Manager to Mode, click on it, and we're going to go to Modeling. We're going to go to Quantize, enable Quantize, and change the movement to 3.125. That's 3.125. And that's going to allow us to move every half a pixel. I like to work in half of pixels. Don't know why, I just do. 1 pixel in Minecraft represents 6.25 centimeters, if you were wondering. So first things first, we're going to go to the character, and we're going to go to the joint button here, not the joint tool, the joint button. You can tell the difference because one is brown and one is green. We want the green one. Why? The joint tool is very unreliable, and you've got to be very accurate. With this you can pretty much place it where you want, and because we have Quantize on, it will snap every half a pixel, so it's just very easy to grab this and move it up to the exact position we need. If we go to the side view, for example, hit H to frame our object, you can see it's exactly at the top. We're going to hold Control down, and we're going to click on the green arrow and drag down. That's going to duplicate it for us, and we want this in the middle because that's where the elbow is, and that's where it's going to bend. You also want to do this one more time for the wrist because we do need an endpoint. And then we need to hierarchy these, which means we need to grab the elbow and drop it inside of the top one, which would be the first joint we created. So grab joint 1 and grab that and put it into joint, and then grab joint 2 and put that into joint 1. Now you can tell if it's actually going to be a child because you'll see a little drop down arrow. That means it's going to be a hierarchy. So we've got the joint 1 and joint 2. Now what we need to do is, if we're going to add IK to this, we actually need to move these. And the reason we need to move them slightly is because at the minute they're all in a straight line. They are all basically 0 on the Z-axis. Now why is it the Z-axis? Well, we're actually looking at this axis here, the blue one, which represented Z. Now we actually need to move these slightly, because if we don't, Cinema 4D, when it tries to solve the IK, it's going to have a very difficult time solving it because these are all in one straight line. It doesn't know which way to give the bend, either in this direction or this direction, or even in any other direction, so it's just going to confuse itself. So what we need to do is drag this in the positive, but at the minute we have Quantize on. Now that would be too much. All we need to do is do a 0.1. That's going to be a 0.1 move. Then we need to grab the wrist, which is technically the end joint, and we need to do a negative 0.1. That's going to basically put it back at 0. The reason we do this is because if we take this for example, and if we move this, you can see the actual bottom joint has moved as well. So to counteract that, we would have to move that back to the center, and that is technically what we have done, but we've done it in such a small increment that it's barely even noticeable, but it is needed, especially if you're adding IK. Now because this is an arm and it's going to give us an L shape, such as going straight down and then to the left, we wanted to bend it in the opposite direction, and then that's going to give us the illusion that the arm will bend in this direction, and that's exactly what we want. So maybe a little bit confusing to understand, but all you really need to understand is that you need a slight bend in it. If this was going to be a leg, you would bend it in, first off you would bend the knee in the opposite direction, so you would bring this to the front, and then you would bring the ankle, I suppose, would come back, so you would do the opposite bend, but you would do it in such a small amount, such as 0.0. So that being said, let's continue. We're going to grab all of these and we're going to go to character, commands, and we're going to bind it. Now what a bind does is it basically takes these joints that were selected and it binds it to this geometry, and it's very simple. It's the easiest way to bind something. It will give you a modifier such as skin, and now if we grab this and if we bend it, you can see that this is what we get. Now what people normally do from this point is they would go into their weights for the skin and they would try to blend it so it would make a nice rigid bend. What we're going to use is a postmorph, and what a postmorph does is it actually edits points, so you can blend between that shape. But let's continue with the final preparation, and the final preparation is very simple. What we need to do is we need to actually move some of these points around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z just before we actually add the bind. And the reason we want to do this before the bind is because it's going to bind to the position of the geometry, which means if we grab the points here, we actually need to move these up 12.5 pixels and down 12.5 pixels. Now if you imagine this being bent, this highlighted edge is actually representing the edge of the elbow, and this is actually representing the front bend of the elbow where it creases. Now I know it's kind of difficult to understand right now, but you will understand as soon as we finish this little step here. So what we want to do is we want to use UL for loop selection and grab these top and bottom loop selections. We want to go to Quantize and turn it off. We want to grab the scale tool and we want to scale these down. Something like that. We want these pretty close but not too close, so something along them lines would be ideal. And the reason we want it as close as possible to this maximum length in which we manipulate these points is because if it's further up like this, it will stretch down at some point, and that's where you're going to get the texture stretching. So if it's as close as possible to the edge here without overlapping, we're not going to get as much texture stretching. So what we do now is once we've done that, we actually have to put the points or the edges back in their original position. So basically grabbing this one, move it back down 12.5. I'm going to put on enable quantize just to make this easier. So we're basically going to put it back to 0, and same with the bottom edge as well, just one of them. Move this up 12.5, and that's pretty much what you have right now. Now we didn't really move the middle edge, which means if we go to our side view, everything is still lined up. It's only the top and bottom ones that we moved in. So grab everything again, then go to character, commands, and bind. Then technically we have bound it again. So if we actually grab our joint tool and rotate this, you can see that's what we're going to get. Now because we have moved them joints closer, we're going to get a problem, and this is how always happens every time I do this. One point is always lopsided, and that's because of the weights. So hold shift and double click on the weights icon, and that's going to give us this dialog box. So you want to change the strength to 0, the mode to apps, which means absolute, and you want to click on the joint 0, which is the top joint. You want to go to the points mode, go to the live selection, and we want to grab these points all at the bottom. Now you can see that the red is actually bleeding right down here, and that's basically causing that little stretching because it's saying these points should be used by the joint 1, which is technically the shoulder joint, and we don't want that. So once they're selected, hit apply, and that's basically going to get rid of any strength from this joint here. Now they are color coded, so same with the green, you can see here, and with the blue there won't be any because that's just the end joint. The two that you want to worry about are these. So once you've done that, you can close it and then go to the model mode, and you'll see we get a perfect bend, which is very, very nice. Now the problem is that we're not getting this perfect 90-degree bend on the technically back end of the arm. So how do we do that? Well, simply put, click on your cube, right click, go to character tags, and we're going to use a pose morph. We're going to use points, which means the points of the geometry. It doesn't have to be points though, it can be edge or polygons. So what we want to do now is, this is where you will kind of understand how it works. If we grab the edge mode, you see we'll go back to our original source, if you like, of like where all the pixels were of this geometry. Now if we go back to model mode, you'll see it'll bend back. So we want to select this one. Now to give you a very noticeable kind of demonstration, if we pull this out and go back to model mode, you can see it's pulled out. If we take this and go back in and then pull this down, you can see when we go to model mode, it's actually getting closer down. So if we take this down to the 12.5 pixels, which is 2 pixels down, you can see we now get this very sharp bend. So when we go back to the model mode, grab the front edge and move this up 12.5, this is technically what we have. We have a top edge, a diagonal edge, and another top edge. If this was going to be a leg, then you would basically reverse this. So the front would be down 12.5 pixels, and the back would be up 12.5 pixels, because that's where the 90-degree edge should be, at the front for a leg. For the elbow, it's going to be at the back. So now if we click on the model mode, you can see we get a perfect elbow, and it looks fantastic. So how do we basically make it so this works automatically? Because generally speaking, it is complete. But if we wanted to basically use this in animation, we would have to do this manually. For example, we would rotate this, let's say, 40 degrees. Now you can see this is looking really weird. And the reason is because it's asking you to use the animation properties and basically put this to 40 degrees also. So this is what it would look like at 40 degrees. And of course at 0 degrees it would look like that. So how do we do this? How do we get Cinema 4D to work it out for us? Well, it is very simple. You can put the espresso tag wherever you want. So I'm going to put it on the joint here for demonstration purposes. Right click, go to Cinema 4D tags, go down to the bottom to espresso, and what we want to do is we want to drag in the middle joint, which technically would be the elbow. I do recommend naming these. And we also want to drag in the pose morph. Now it's important to make sure the pose morph is actually on animate and not on edit. So that being said, let's drag this in, and to calculate this, we need a calculate node. So right click, go to new node, espresso, and we want a calculate node, and we want a range mapper. Now what a range mapper is going to do, it's going to take two values and mix them together. So for example, for the joint tool here, we're actually going to be using the rotation. So rotation, another word for rotation is degrees. So the input range is going to be degrees. The output range is going to be percent, because this is percent, 0%, 100%. So go onto your range mapper and change the output range to percent. Now this is going to give us parameters down here, which we have to edit. Now it's saying the input and input lower as 0 degrees, which is technically right. We're at 0 degrees. You can see down here when we do rotate it, the P is actually being affected. So we want the base one to be which is the lowest it can go, is 0 degrees. The input upper is the maximum degrees. We only want this to rotate to 90 degrees, so we would put in here 90 degrees. But we need to make sure we put in negative 90 because it is actually rotating on the negative P. Keep that in mind, it's very important. And the output lower and output upper are fine as they are default. The negative here is 0. Well, I should say the lower is 0 and the upper is of course 100%, so they're actually fine. Now to tie all this in together, you want to grab the circle of the input, drag it and drop it on the red output of the joint tool. That's going to give us a dialog box. We want to use coordinates, we want to use rotation, and we want to use the P rotation. And the P rotation is the one we're actually rotating on, which is technically the x-axis. And then we want to grab the output, drop it on the input of the pose morph. We want to go down to tag properties, and it's going to be pose 0 strength. Now if we actually grab this, turn off Quantize because that will give us some really jagged results, and just rotate this in not that on the x-axis, you can see we actually get a very nice bend. And that is pretty much it. I mean, there's not much more to say. Now if you do want to add in some IK, grab these and the first and last joint and go to character, commands, create IK, and if we go onto this and maybe put it as a circle, something like 24, and what we're going to do is we're going to freeze the coordinates on this so we can actually use the reset PSR. So if we grab this, you can see it actually bends on the correct axis, which is what we want. And then we can reset the PSR and all is well. Now you might get some results where it kind of is overlapping. It's okay. Generally you don't want to go past 90 degrees. I'm not sure if it'll work, but you can in fact go to the joint tool. If I just put this beyond 90 degrees, you can see in the joint tool, if you go to kinematics, you've got the limits. Now you can actually limit this if you click on either one of these. What I found, if you're using the P-axis, it's going to be the H-axis, and it's basically asking you what degrees do you want to limit. The minimum range on H would be 0 degrees. The maximum range on H would be, for us, it would be 90 degrees. So that means we can't go past 90 degrees and we can't go past 0 degrees. I use this on the joint simply because I don't think it's realistic to go past 90 degrees because the joint starts to look a little weird. So if you can't go past 90 degrees, then it's going to look pretty decent all the way through. So that's one method to use. Now I'll go through texturing very quickly and show you that there's pretty much minimal distortion, and some people might have an hard time actually texturing this. So grab a new texture, throw it on, and we're going to load up a skin texture here. This skin texture, I'll use this skin. I'm going to hit no, put this onto none, and basically what I want to do is we want to go to the layout and go to BP UV edit. We want to grab the polygon UV tool and we want to basically select these polygons, so we want to be selecting this. Now we can't actually see it in the viewport here, so what we can do is we can drag and drop this in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't work, go to File, Open Texture, and basically just open a skin. And for me, it's going to be this one on my desktop, which is obviously different to this one, but it's fine, it doesn't matter. As long as you've got a skin, it's going to be fine. So if you want to Control A to select all these polygons, you want to go to Projection and hit Cubic. We want these to be cubic. It's very important that you hit cubic first. Then we're going to go to the Transform, and I know that this arm is 8 pixels by 12 pixels. So the X is representing left to right. So we're going to say 8 divided by 64. Now, how do we get 64? Well, the entire document of the character is 64 pixels long. Then we want to go to the Y, which is up and down. Now, I know it's 12, so we want to divide 12 by 32, and I know that the document is 32 pixels high. You can also go to canvas size, I believe, not canvas size, texture size, and you can see here the width is 64 and the height is 32. So this is 64 by 32, and you basically just divide the pixels of your Minecraft character by the document size and hit apply. And did I do that correctly? I'm not sure if I did, because that looks a little weird. Let's just do that again. We're going to put this at 8. Is it 8 or is it 4? I'm sure it's 4. It's 4. So it's going to be 4 divided by 64, and then it's going to be 12 divided by 32. It's important that you get these correct, and then we'll do that again, and there we go. So I don't know where I got 8 from, but yeah. So now that we've got that, we can actually drag this into place, but as you can see, it's going to be very difficult to actually drag it into place. So what we need to do is go to the snapping and enable Quantize, and put this to 3.125, which will basically allow us to snap this to our document. So all you do now is grab each section and put it in its representative place on the textures, which would be something like that. Now for the tops and the bottoms, again, it's very simple. You grab them. Now they're going to be scaled in the same proportions because we selected everything. So again, just go back to projection, put it at cubic, and then go to transform and do the same. Now I know the bottom is 4 pixels by 4 pixels, so the X is fine the way it is. We'll just change the Y, so we'll do 4 divided by 32 and hit apply, and that's going to give us this. So we can go to the move tool, move this, grab the bottom and move it across. I actually only meant to select one, that one, and we can move that back to the top. There we go. And then we can go back to the standard startup, and that is pretty much the character rigged and textured. So what we can do now is actually grab the actual goal. Mine went blank then. Grab the goal, and you can see as we're rotating this, we're going to get very, very minimal distortion, especially here. Now you probably could get away with having another pixel. I know that the shoulder is actually 4 pixels down. I've actually got rid of one of them. That's to help minimize distortion. But as you can see, you probably could fit another one in here without having any distortion. But you know, overall, I think the joint looks pretty decent, and that's pretty much how you would set up and rig and texture an arm. You do the same for the leg, and it's just a really nice and easy way of setting this up. So I know this tutorial's gone on quite long, so I'm going to end it there. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this helped you out, and if you've got any questions, please leave it in the comment section below, and I shall catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.